Shalom everyone. Today we will obviously be talking about Iran, and right now it's going through a silent crackdown. The internet is dark and the death toll is skyrocketing. Reports suggest thousands have already perished as hospitals and morgues overflow across Iran, with international airlines canceling flights and Starlink access being systematically jammed by Chinese technology. The regime is attempting to crush the uprising in total isolation. In his highly anticipated address, the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei signaled a no-compromise stance towards both domestic protesters and international adversaries. His rhetoric focused on the theme of unyielding resistance, specifically targeting the United States. Accusations of bloodshed came as well, as Khamenei explicitly accused Washington of direct involvement in Iranian deaths, claiming the U.S. responsible for the blood of over 1,000 citizens. The no-step-back policy of the regime is articulated by the fact that it said it will not retreat from its core revolutionary principles, despite this being the largest civil uprising in nearly 2 decades. The speech served as a final warning to those cooperating with foreign powers, labeling them as traitors rather than protesters. Analysts are closely monitoring the state-affiliated Fars news agency. Recently, the outlet published footage of security forces being beaten and disarmed in Isfahan. While this appears to show regime weakness, intelligence experts suggest this is a calculated propaganda move. By broadcasting the humiliation of security forces, the regime is likely manufacturing public justification for a much stronger response and more brutal message of suppression, which we are now already seeing with literally thousands of dead. A report from the Telegraph confirmed that Revolutionary Guard and the army are placed on the highest levels of alert, and casualty estimates from the opposition channels suggest a catastrophic death toll, with estimates in the high thousands. Reports describe hospitals and morgues in all the cities as being completely overwhelmed, and even recent reports this morning are showing hangars full of bodies and overflowing, so that identification by family is nearly impossible. There's also been a wave of flight cancellations by the international airlines that have effectively isolated Tehran from the West. And this, of course, could be an indicator of things to come, because when the airlines cancel the flights, it means that they are concerned about what will happen. The White House is reportedly considering options to stop the massacre. While no aircraft carrier is currently in the Persian Gulf, with the Abraham Lincoln being the closest one, somewhere in the East Indian Ocean, the U.S. maintains 4 Ohio-class cruise missile submarines in undisclosed locations, a very top military secret, each of them capable of a massive Tomahawk strike. Additionally, we already saw the B-2 stealth bombers, and we have in the past seen the B-1 Lancers that remain on standby for global strikes. And we saw in June that they can fly rather quickly around the world if needed, so that is always a quicker option. Not to mention, of course, the U.S. has military bases all over the Gulf, like in Djibouti and in Qatar, and so on and so forth. Speaker of the House and Secretary of State are coordinating with regional allies to prepare a new beginning in the Middle East, one that potentially involves the fall of the Ayatollah regime, which of course will be the best thing that's happened to the Middle East and the world in decades, not to mention for Iran itself, but anyways. Donald Trump is, as he often does, tweeting daily threats. We will see if he puts his money where his mouth is. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has issued a provocative red line. Beijing has signaled that it will provide military, intelligence, and technological support to Tehran if its sovereignty is violated. this puts China on a direct collision course with U.S. interests, as Beijing seeks to protect its primary energy supplier and regional proxy. So far, we have seen the complete blackout of Starlink internet, supposedly using Chinese military-grade technology. This may be a real game changer, as it allows the regime to massacre in silence and disrupts coordination of opposition. Now, like the Starlink blackout, we've also seen a media blackout. The majority of Western mainstream legacy news is hardly reporting on the situation in Iran at all, with minor, bland reports, not going into the details, not going into the numbers, not going into the thousands that are being murdered. Very, very hesitant. And as I've said many times before, it's another case of no Jews, no news. If this was the Jews in Israel killing thousands of Palestinians, obviously it would be reported in every news outlet across the globe, and there would be hundreds of thousands of people protesting in the streets and on university campuses. But because there's no Jews involved and no Israel involved, then it doesn't matter how many thousands or tens of thousands are massacred in a short span of time, in just a few days, just like there was no global outrage over the 500,000 murdered in Syria, the 500,000 murdered in Yemen, the 500,000 murdered in Darfur. There will be no outrage about the thousands murdered in Iran because Israel is not involved. Shame! Moving on briefly to a few other global news stories. In Syria, we just said no news, no Jews, no news. In Syria, in Aleppo, there's a security vacuum in northern Syria that has allowed forces led by Golani to carry out horrific acts of violence disguised regular soldiers. These jihadist elements have been documented executing Kurdish fighters and civilians. There's a growing fear among the minority groups, the Christians, the Alawites, the Druze, that they are next in line for ethnic cleansing. Not to mention, Turkey has moved beyond indirect support and is actively bombing Kurdish positions near Tabqa to protect Golani's forces from collapse. And on that note, it's worth noting that Turkey has, in a sense, annexed northern parts of Syria and controls them entirely. And by that I mean that the salaries of the city officials are paid by Turkey. The school books are Turkish produced and in Turkish. The infrastructure, the water, the electricity, all comes from Turkey. Turkey has annexed parts of Syria, but no one is talking about it because they are not a Zionist colonial power. So it is completely ignored. But anyways, intelligence reports indicate that Turkish intelligence is collaborating with Iran's Revolutionary Guard to ambush the Kurdish fighters. This is, of course, an unholy alliance between Ankara and Tehran that highlights their shared goal of suppression of Kurdish autonomy in Iran, Iraq, and Syria, which has been going on for over 20 years. Only the Iraqi Kurds have been able to get some sense of autonomous rule due to their help of the United States during the Iraq invasion. But the Turkish Kurds, the Iranian Kurds, and the Syrian Kurds are in bad shape. Moving on to Israel and Gaza, we can of course see the failure of Hamas to disarm. Despite the framework of Trump's plan, Hamas has secured new funding sources. And rather than moving towards a civilian government, the organization is actively recruiting and paying new fighters and not disarming. Duh! And people would have had to been smoking in order to think that Hamas would disarm without Israel being the ones to do it. Anyone who thinks that the Turkish, for that, we just spoke about the Turks, so that the Turks would disarm them, since Erdogan is pushing very hard to have Turkish forces in any Gazan on the ground thing, but that is only to defend Hamas. But anyways, no one is going to disarm Hamas except Israel. And Israel is currently finalizing military plans to retake the remaining Hamas-held pockets in Gaza. The refusal of Hamas to disarm has effectively voided the ceasefire agreements in the eyes of Israeli security planners. And maybe now that we have a new military advocate general instead of Yerushalmi, that it should be arrested and tried for treason, the army will finally fight to win, instead of with its hands tied behind its back, supposedly based on the MAG's wrong interpretation of international law. So, ladies and gentlemen, please pray for what's going on in Iran. Obviously, if things get bad, they will probably strike out at Israel, but nevertheless, despite the casualties that will certainly come, it is a price worth paying for the people of Iran to have freedom and for Israel to be free of the head of the snake. Shalom. God bless you all.